Okay, we are live. So welcome again to SLP Summit. We are about to get into our course, 5-Team Collaboration Hacks in Special Education, which is sponsored by SLP Toolkit and SLP Now. Let me go back to our screen. Okay, so my name is Lisa Kathman. I'm with SLP Toolkit, and I have Trish Geraghty with me here too, who also works with SLP Toolkit. And before we get to our course today, we just have a couple of housekeeping items. So if you have questions for us, please use the questions tab, not the chat, because everything gets lost in the chat. It flies by. So we will see it if you put it in the chat, questions area. With that being said, if you have any platform related questions, software related questions, performance of software, any tech support, please use the question mark in your on your screen versus the questions area, or you can email our team at hello@bethebrightest.com. And if you would like to view this course with captions today, you can turn the captions on in the Bright Ideas Media platform. As a quick reminder, take a minute to review the ASHA CE opt-in requirements located in the resources section for each course, and email us at hello@bethebrightest with any questions. So we're going to get to it. Our course today is 5 collaboration hacks in special education. And this is one of those topics that is near and dear to my heart. I am an SLP by trade, and Trish has worn many hats, including an ED teacher, a resource teacher, special education director. So we are passionate about supporting providers, but also teams, and how we can do that more effectively. And we know that collaboration is best practice for our students, but we don't always look at it through that lens of how it benefits the adults implementing it. And I think Fong touched upon that. If you were able to catch the first course of SLP Summit, that, you know, connecting and community is so very important for us as providers. But collaboration can be tricky because it can be difficult to implement for a variety of reasons. It might be your first year as a provider and you have no clue where to start. But I will say, even if you have years of experience under your belt and have been collaborating like a champion in the past, one staff change can throw a wrench in everything and you have to start from scratch again. So today we are going to talk about some key areas where collaboration can occur, as well as some hacks that can make it easier. And if you've ever caught a presentation that we have done before, Sarah and I have talked often about that working in special education, you know, the beauty of that is that you're not on an island. You have a team. You don't have to do everything alone. So that's what we're hoping to touch upon today. So before we get into our course content, we wanted to go over some disclosures and do that housekeeping. So here is our disclosures slide. Trish and I both work for SLP Toolkit, and we receive compensation and salary from SLP Toolkit and KIT, which are 2 of the products we will reference today. I also work for Bright Ideas Media, which is the amazing company that is hosting SLP Summit. And this presentation will not just focus on those tools. We're going to have a variety of tools that we chat about, but when it comes to SLP specific software, we're going to primarily focus on our tools, SLP Toolkit and KIT, during today's presentation. During our hour today, our main objectives are to have you learn 5 collaboration hacks that can make a significant impact in your daily routines. And we'll discuss tools and strategies and tips that you can implement when you go back to school. We want you to be able to list 2 software tools that contribute to collaboration efficiency, as well as describe ways that IEP teams can collaborate on both data collection and goal creation. So who are we? Here's a picture of Trish and I. We were at a conference in San Antonio earlier this year, got to meet a lot of special education teachers and directors, but Trish and I go way back. We worked together in the largest school district in Arizona for several years. I was the lead SLP and Trish was my special education director. So it's really fun now that we get to work together at SLP Toolkit, which is a web-based software application for SLPs that has data collection and assessment features and various things that support school-based SLPs. And I would say that we are both super passionate about removing barriers. And that includes not just our students, but for ourselves as professionals too. So we like to look at finding ways to streamline best practice without taking shortcuts that impact students. And then the last one on there is wannabe marathon runners. I only add that because, again, the nature of our relationship, Trish will be like, hey, do you want to do this half K or half marathon in 2 months? And I'll be like, yeah, sure. And then I won't train. And then it's a disaster. But, you know, we do it. We try our best. We complete it. And there we go. So I already mentioned that one of the best things that comes with working in schools is that you're never an island. We have a unique opportunity to collaborate and support each other in this setting. And there is research that supports that idea of collaborative teaching and how it improves student outcomes, but also increases job satisfaction. So if you think about a time when you personally felt overwhelmed with a case, did you get through it alone or did you connect with a colleague? It could be somebody on your school team that you're close to or a fellow SLP to come up with those potential solutions. I know that Fong referenced also when it came to surveying the bilingual SLPs that the majority of them talked about connecting with peers and having that as a wonderful support to get through processes. So having a team, it just brings new perspectives that you may not think about alone. And collaboration in general can go beyond just those isolated cases. So it works best when it's done consistently and throughout the school year. So before we actually get into our hacks for the day, we wanted to get an idea of how you would describe your collaboration if you think about last school year. So in the chat, just drop somewhere from a 0 to a 5, with 0 being, oh, what team? I did everything by myself, to 5 being, you know, I am so amazing at collaborating that I could teach a course on it and tell others about it. So let us know. We are keeping an eye on the chat. And I know for me, the first time I ever collaborated was with a resource teacher at my first full-time job as a school-based SLP. And it just made sense to me because we shared a lot of the same caseload. And I would go in and I would do some language-based activities and we would co-teach together. So that was how we teamed up on collaboration. And it looks like there in the chat, there are a lot of different responses. I think I saw a 7. So you must be a superstar. If you want to come in and present with us today, please do so. But it's tricky. Collaboration is so hard. And we're going to get into, again, what are some areas you can collaborate on? I think the first thing we think of is that co-treatment piece, but there are some other pieces that we can consider as well. So our first hack is working on goals as a team. And that not only ensures that everyone's efforts are aligned, but that also the goals that we set are comprehensive and they're student-centered. So I think most of us know the importance of goals in themselves. They allow for students with any disability to achieve success and growth and increase positive behaviors. They guide the team and they make it clear what everyone is working on and what the expectations are for student success. But how you create the goals is just as important. They have to be well thought out. They have to be measurable and relevant to that student as a whole, which means that they can't just be created in isolation from your point of view in a silo. The goals are really what guide the team and they align our efforts and they ensure that we're all working towards that same outcome. So first, creating SMART goals is kind of your baseline. You want those specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. And writing the goal in a way that is easy to measure and makes sense to anyone who reads it is super important. So we like to use this template. So the student will what, when given, what supports, scoring. So what is the scoring method? And how are you measuring it? And what is the frequency that you're measuring it? Because I am speaking about myself, but I'm sure it's not just me, but when left to our own devices, I think we can overcomplicate goal writing. We may know exactly what it is that we want to target and how to measure it, but if we gave it to someone else, they might not have any idea what we're talking about. If we aren't using this kind of structure, we're really focusing on something that's measurable and how we're measuring it. So it using a SMART goal kind of format just helps us prevent writing mega goals, which are those goals that include every possible skill under the sun, which are always super fun to inherit because then you have to figure out a way to measure that on the basis of the progress report grading guidelines. But on the flip side, it also helps us not write vague goals. So the vague goals are hard for others to read, but I also think trip ourselves up when taking data and trying to report out progress, because you might be really sure what it is that you were thinking about when you wrote the goal at the time of the IEP, and then 9 weeks go by and you're like, huh? Okay. So collaborative SMART goals, it's not just how you write it. Those SMART goals are important, making sure that you can measure it and that you know what's being measured, but it's also who you involve. So just think about, have you ever shown up to an IEP meeting without seeing anybody else's goals, because you're just cranking them out one at a time, and then you realize in the meeting that your resource teacher and you both have reading comprehension goals? Yep, me too. I've done that. So we want to look at the data from all team members to get an idea of the students' needs, and then define that SMART goal or goals that best address the needs, and then define how each team member is going to support those goals. So if there is a need area, for example, reading comprehension, the goal might look something like this with that format that we just looked at. So the student will identify main ideas and key details within a text when given a graphic organizer scoring 14 out of 15 as measured by a rubric monthly. So this might be the only goal for reading comprehension, and something that both the SLP and the special education teacher both want to support. So the key then is to next define the who and the how in that specially designed instruction part of the IEP. So in that example, if there was just the one goal for both you and the resource teacher, the SLP might be working on those underlying language skills that are critical for reading comprehension. So we are working on things like vocabulary and syntax and semantics and the story grammar elements. And we also might be working on some explicit comprehension strategies, like creating an imaged gestalt of the story to help them be able to then recall details. We might be doing some semantic mapping with them on graphic organizers for the main idea and details, so we can make it easier for them to see what pieces of information are connected in the story. And then I think as SLPs too, we might be working on those explicit instruction, main idea and details in a variety of ways. So maybe we're doing it in thematic units or in paragraph comprehension to give them some of those foundational skills in different contexts. But then the resource teacher, it might be really trying to identify where is the breakdown in terms of reading skills. So are they not able to do main idea and details because they're struggling in fluency or decoding or processing speed? So then the teacher would use those explicit reading strategies to support that breakdown. And the resource teacher might also be using leveled texts that match the students' reading abilities to gradually increase complexity and identifying main idea and details in those contexts. Often the resource teacher is connecting to other academic areas such as writing and working closely with the Gen Ed teacher too to align what's going on in the Gen Ed curriculum. So each provider, in this case, there would be the one goal, and you're outlining those needs in the present levels. But then when you get to that area where you're putting in service times, you would list your individual service time for addressing the goal. Plus, an often overlooked, I think, component of this too is what accommodations does the Gen Ed teacher need to be doing to help implement that? So the SLP and resource teacher would work with that general ed teacher to reinforce effective strategies in the Gen Ed classroom. And then everyone would collaborate to use the same graphic organizer and common instructional vocabulary, because that just makes it easier for the student to generalize that skill in a variety of contexts. And then when it comes time to actually reporting progress, you will want to look at the collected data from a variety of sources to determine, where on the rubric does that student fall and what score should be assigned on that progress report. So how do we do this? When anything that we're talking about today, I think I want you to keep in mind that this is not something that it's an all or nothing. This is not, binary. You don't have to say, I'm going to do it this specific way with everyone on our caseload. It's really something that you need to determine which students it makes sense with, what staff would it make sense with to collaborate, and start small and just maybe think of that one person. I loved, again, I keep referencing Fong because it was an amazing presentation. So definitely check that out. But I liked how she used that term, like, where's your safe space? So who is somebody that you feel safe to collaborate with? And because there is a lot of trial and error that you're going to have to go through. So I'm going to direct you to the chat one more time. And I want you to just think about what are some professionals or maybe even some specific goal areas that you can collaborate on. So it could be something that you've done in the past that you want to share with other people, or just, kind of brainstorming what makes sense. And I know I talked about the resource teacher. I also one year had a gen ed teacher that, bless her heart, had she was a kindergarten teacher that taught half-day kindergarten. So she had an afternoon and a morning class and had about 26 students in each class. So I think I had 12 of her students alone. So it just naturally made sense to collaborate with her. And Trish, I don't know if you want to add some in here as well, like who you've collaborated with.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some great ones in the chat. I think for me as a former self-contained teacher, but also resource, SLP is always a great go-to, but I've also had some great experiences with occupational therapists as well. But in the chat, I'm seeing social worker and psychologist. So some things that I didn't even think about. So this is fantastic, everyone that's participating in that.
Yeah. So there are some tools that can help make it easier. So I often say that in terms of software, our personal lives might be in 2024, but then our professional lives are stuck somewhere in like 1997 because we love our pen and paper. But think about right now, if you needed to search information on a topic, would you rather grab an encyclopedia and do some research, from an encyclopedia off the shelf? Or like, I think of, I'm really this old, the library and the microfiche, and you could look at those, like, screen or scanned in old newspaper clippings. Or would you prefer to go to Google or whatever your search engine is and type in some keywords on your phone and get the info you need? So software, modern software has come a long way in supporting us. It's ever evolving, and we have to embrace it beyond just, Netflix and the bank and the things that we use it in our personal lives. These, there are tools that were not necessarily created for an educational context. They might be a productivity app, or people get really creative in using tools in our field. So the idea, though, of software is that it makes your life easier and that it streamlines processes that you and your team need in order to effectively collaborate. So here are a few of the resources that I think help with communication and coordination and organization to create those collaborative goals. Checklists are one. So if you have a checklist that you like, awesome. We are actually at the very end going to share a link to resources that we've included in here. So don't panic. It's not on the Bright site, but we will be sharing that. So this checklist is actually included. It can help you coordinate with like your resource teacher to determine what are the strengths and needs. What is the teacher seeing? So this is something you complete together. And then you can have those discussions as far as, do we want the same goal with that varied service time and how we're addressing it? Or do we want separate goals? So either way, something like this will help you look at the student more holistically from various data perspectives and avoid that overlap, especially you don't want to walk in the meeting and find out that overlap. So the tools that can help with this, if you are familiar, I will reference Google. That is the platform that I am most familiar with. I think Microsoft Teams and Microsoft in general might have comparable tools, but I think of Google Forms and Docs and Sheets that you can take some of these checklists that you might have living in paper somewhere and then digitize them. So you can use it and rename it for different students. And then you can use Google Chat to coordinate in real time. Or I think if you're an SLP toolkit user, that there is a digitized version of this checklist in the resources. So what's cool about that is that you would answer these questions with your resource teacher in SLP Toolkit and score it together. And then it will just kind of tally all of those strengths and needs for you. So you don't have to take it out and pull it and put it somewhere else. You can literally just copy and paste and then assign it to a fresh student every time you need to use that to score, and then put it right there in your present level section. Okay, so hack number one we're done with. Let's go on to hack number 2, which is to divide and conquer data collection. So data collection is something that as speech therapists, I think we have an advantage of. It's something that we are used to collecting, that we learned in grad school. It's just kind of, something you have to do. But I think where it can get tricky is that the how you collect it. That can get daunting because you might not be sure even what kind of data you should be collecting, because you're writing these annual goals. And we know that our session data is what's supposed to be driving us to eventually get there, but that's a year away. So in the meantime, you have to collect data that helps you determine the information that you need to keep moving that student forward. So data collection is important. We know that, and we have to do it, but it's not just because somebody tells us we have to. It's not just because we have to bill Medicaid. Data is really what informs our instruction, and it helps us track progress and identify needs. And that regular and accurate data collection is the backbone of effective instruction. Whether you are a therapist or a teacher, it tells us what we're doing. If it tells us if it's working, but I think equally important, it tells us what is not working. And we want to note that kind of information so we don't spin our wheels, because time is super precious. We don't want to waste it on ineffective strategies. So just like when we're creating goals, when we're collecting data on these goals, we get more bang for our buck when we do this as a team. So how do we do this effectively? I think the first thing you have to consider is who is taking data and on what. So be really clear on that, the who and the what. Do you want to see how a student is doing in different settings? Then maybe you and the classroom teacher and the resource teacher are all using some sort of shared rubric to see how the student is performing across those different settings. Do you want to take data on one aspect of reading, like comprehension, and have the resource teacher take data on fluency so you can get a more complete picture of a student's abilities? So make sure you're doing some sort of regular check-in to talk about what data is needed. It can be adjusted, as the student is progressing, and also who needs to take it, so everyone sort of knows their part and that the data that is collected is consistent. So let's get into the tools that can make this as easy as possible for everyone involved. As I already mentioned, I am a huge fan of digital tools. So we are actually at Toolkit, we're putting the finishing touches on a tool, a new product called Kit. And that really came out of the feedback that we've gotten over the years from the SLPs, that, their resource teachers and their OTs and other team members were jealous that they didn't have something like SLP Toolkit for their caseloads. So our objective with Kit is to create software that just doesn't address the processes and streamlining how you're taking data, but also addresses the difficulties in communication and collaboration among team members. So we were hoping to have that as a tool to show you today, but it is still getting some final touches on it. And we will be sharing more details about how that looks when it's ready for you to use in the next couple of weeks. So just keep an eye on your inbox. But in the meantime, you can use something like Google Forms even to create some sort of collaborative data sheet or rubric for a student. There is an example in the resources that I promised are coming at the end that there's a Google form that you can copy and edit and make it your own. But you can do something like, what I like about Google Forms is you can name the form after the student. You can add questions on there about the date of the service and the staff name and the goal type. And you can designate whether fields are required or not. You can also, Google Forms allows you to add sections. So that's pretty cool if you had students with multiple goals, or if the form gets too long, you can break it up a little bit. and they can be password protected, which is important. So Google also gives you that flexibility to choose from different question types. You can have short answer responses, check boxes, drop down menus, rating scales. So it's customizable for how your team determines is the best way to collect data. And then once you've created the form, you can share it. So just send it to anybody that needs to be filling out that form. And when you collect their responses, what's nice is that you can export those to a spreadsheet. So that's helpful. So your team can review the data kind of more linearly and as a team and make adjustments and tweak the form if needed. And also tweak your instruction based on that data coming from multiple sources. So if something like rubrics are new to you, I have more details in the resources too that you can check out that kind of talk about that. At SLP Toolkit, we ran into, when we were creating progress report assessments, so progress monitoring assessments, we ran into the idea that, not every skill is concrete. Not every skill can be captured by a plus and a minus. So if I'm doing something like articulation, percentage makes sense. And there is a clear correct or incorrect answer. But if I'm doing something like story retell or any other skill that is more dynamic, I might have lots of things that I'm tracking. So rubric just helps make that easier. And then when you're sharing that, then you have that systematic way to collect and analyze data, and it just kind of keeps your team more cohesive and allows you to make those instructional decisions that are data-driven. Okay, Trish, you are up with hack number 3.
All right. So you have the data, you collected it collaboratively, excuse me. And now it's time to analyze that together. So this collaborative approach helps us adjust instruction in real time and also to look for patterns that might not be obvious at first glance. The number one reason for collaborative data analysis is to be able to make adjustments to instruction as close to real time as possible. Working with the team helps us look for patterns and trends, and it also allows us to identify any gaps in learning that students might be experiencing. Before we dig into the hacks, I just want to start off with all of the assessments that are available to the team. And this document is the Balanced Assessment Framework from the Arizona Department of Education. Again, all of this will be available in your resources. But there's 3 sections to the Balanced Assessment Framework. And the first one highlighted here is the screener and diagnostic column. So screeners are brief tests. They're focused on targeted skills that are highly predictive of likelihood of success on a particular curricular benchmark. So think about the beginning of the year assessments. Some of you have already started school or you're gearing up for it. Students are going to be taking these screeners right away. And then the next one is diagnostic. Oops, sorry. We're still on diagnostic. Diagnostic assessments provide data on sub-skills a student does or does not have. So this is really drilling down a little more specific. So think about the Acadians, or if you're familiar with it, that's the new word for dibbles. If I always think dibbles in my mind, but it's really Acadians, and it's to get that targeted information that you need for early literacy. All right, and the next section of the Balanced Assessment Framework are formative assessments. So these assessments are for learning. They're quick and frequent, designed to support the instructional design. Some examples of this could be exit tickets, your daily check-ins, CRTs. You'll see in the definition, PLC is referenced, and in this context, that stands for Professional Learning Communities. You might use something different in your school or district. Some people call them collaborative team meetings, but I just wanted to reference something if that's an unknown word. And then looking at summative assessments, I know I said that there were only going to be 3 sections to the Balanced Assessment Framework. And with summative assessments, they're typically tests that are at the end of an instructional unit or length of time. Summative assessments, though, it really comes down to whether it's an assessment for learning or assessment of learning based on how you use that data. So if the data is used to design instruction in real time and it's forming that lesson, then it's going to be formative. The test, if it's used to measure the students against standards or to provide a grade, then it's going to be more summative. And then this final balanced assessment framework is that we're moving from the assessment of learning or from learning to of learning. And this mindset shift really is about how are we going to use that data as a reflective process. This is no longer something we're doing in real time to design and improve our instruction to make sure all the needs are working for students. This is after the fact instruction review. So it's really designed for you as a provider and to work together with your team to see what worked in our instruction and what refinements do we need to make in the future.
So for SLPs,
okay, so that's,
would this be
I'm sorry?
For SLPs, would this be the progress monitoring piece then that we do every grading period would fall into that summative assessment?
In the summative, yes.
Okay.
Great question, Lisa. And I'm about to dig into what it looks like from each perspective from each provider, because I just wanted to give an overview of the balanced assessment framework. But if you can see here on this one, highlighted 3 individuals on the team that we could start with this collaborative data analysis approach: the special education teacher, which is the SET, speech language pathologist, and then the general education teacher. So now let's look at what that looks like in each section. So you can see the different colored dots. If you work left to right, you can see right there at the top on the left-hand side in the orange circle is that screener. Like I mentioned, as you start gearing up for the beginning of the school year, your gen ed teachers are going to have probably quite a few screeners that they're going to give to their students so they can use that to design their instruction. As special education providers, we're a little more interested in those diagnostic tools. And then as we move through to the right, we have that formative assessment. So again, this is the assessment of learnings or for learning. We're using this real-time data to really get to designing our lessons for everyone. That summative piece right there in the middle where you see all 3 of those circles, the orange for the general education teacher is a little bit larger because I typically think of these as those end of unit assessments. But this also is from a SLP perspective. This is what you're reporting on your quarterly progress reports or more frequent as needed by your district, same as a special education teacher. And then that final section there at the end, those are your standardized state tests. Think of it that way. And that's really a large section of what our general education teachers do. That being said, though, we also ensure that we are providing accommodations and making sure our students are getting the supports that they need. All right, so now that we have all the information about a balanced assessment framework, let's get to the how are we going to make this work. And first and foremost, you have to schedule regular meetings that focus on data review. Protect these meetings from other obligations and stay focused on the topic. Create a tool for combined data decision-making to help in developing common assessments, ensuring consistency, and measuring student progress. Make sure you document the team's thought process, and this will help in the future collaborative planning. So much of collaboration really does come down to effective communication, and Lisa's going to talk later about communication strategies and hacks. Okay, so let's talk about data analysis hacks. I can't stress this enough. Don't recreate the wheel. There are amazing existing tools that are already out there. I've included some examples. The first one is a PLC data analysis protocol. Even if your school and grade level teams are not using a professional learning community or engaged in that, you can still borrow their amazing data protocols. So one is attached here, and it just really takes you through some guiding questions. And it's great for the data reflection part, but it also guides you on what are you going to do next, and what are those aha moments that you can do to refine your instruction for the very next day, but also before students are ready to take their end of unit assessments. The next tool is called Get the Scoop. It takes the team through a data analysis by reviewing and discussing the strengths, concerns, observations, objectives, and products from a unit. And then the last one referenced here is if you prefer a more fluid approach to data analysis, then a data-driven dialogue might be a protocol you're interested in. It guides the team through a series of open-ended questions. Bottom line, though, if you don't see anything that resonates with you, you can search Google. Trust me, there are tons of tools that you can borrow and refine and make your own.
Okay, so that brings us on to our fourth hack, which is communication. Effective communication is really the cornerstone of any successful team. And it may seem like a no-brainer as SLPs, but I think sometimes we focus so much on supporting our students' communication needs that we forget how crucial it is in our own professional exchanges with the adults that we work with. So we have to be able to clearly communicate as a team, and that lets us clarify and set expectations and effectively collaborate. So without clear communication, even the best plans can fall apart. I love this quote from Brené Brown: "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." So when you become committed to collaboration, communication is key, and it has to be an ongoing, honest communication or conversation. Everyone has to be on the same page and feel open to speak clearly, even if it's hard or uncomfortable, because there are going to be times that things aren't working. And probably more often than not, especially if it's the beginning of your collaborative efforts or a new collaborative relationship. And when we assume knowledge from our teammates or don't establish those clear expectations with a colleague, but then we hold them accountable or blame them for not delivering, that is unkind. And talking about people rather than talking to them is unkind. And it can diminish your team's trust and create situations where people are talking behind each other's backs. And that all leads to negatively impacting the students that everyone is trying to support. So it will just bring your collaborative efforts to a screeching halt. And communication, it will take work initially, because you have to figure out everyone's different communication preferences and styles. So work together to set the communication protocols and do those regular check-ins. And think about, is your team the kind of team that functions best via email or Google Chat? Or do you need to schedule a regular sit-down meeting and look at each other's faces, whether that be in person, you have lunch together, or virtually? And that, again, can vary from team to team or even teammate to teammate. I think back again of all of my collaborative efforts over the years, and it really is different with each and every individual, and sometimes even with the same individual, but then you have a new batch of students that requires tweaks. So take the time to find out what works best for everyone who is involved. And then beyond the how and the when you meet, you also need to set clear expectations. So does your team need a formal agenda to follow? And how do you determine what you want to accomplish during your meeting? What do you need to do before each meeting in order to meaningfully participate? What do you need to know? What do you are there actions that you have to do or things that you have to look up or bring in order to be a meaningful participant in that meeting? So I think another big one is what are the expectations for attendance? If someone cancels every time you're supposed to meet, then not only is nothing going to get accomplished, but there's going to be some frustration, and that will become a barrier. So protect time and follow through with what you say you're going to do. Those are huge. And then also, what are the expectations for after the meetings? Set clear tasks with who is responsible and by when, and then hold each other accountable for that. Because those clear expectations up front not only reduces frustration if someone doesn't follow through, but it also makes you more efficient as a team, so you don't waste time, because nobody has time for inefficiency or wasting time. Everybody's ramping up and running in a million different directions. So protect your time and make it as streamlined as possible. And then once you have those norms established, then you need to find some systems that work for your team that address how you're going to communicate, but then also how you're going to document those collaboration outcomes, which is what Trish had referenced previously. Is it's not just what you do, but how are you going to document what you said and how are you going to follow through? So for day-to-day communication with your team, Google Chat is something that many people have access to, and it's good for in the moment stuff, but it doesn't have a lot of functionality to save that information or find it in an easy way later on if you need it. So at SLP Toolkit, we've tried a few different things for day-to-day communication, and we landed on a software called Slack, which again will be added in the resources at the end. But you can create groups in Slack to keep all of your information organized and easy to find. It's searchable. It has features too to help keep you on top of things. So I think sometimes I'll read a message and I can't get to it till later, so I can save it in my later folder, or even set it to give me a reminder for a time that I know I can give it more attention and follow through on whatever the ask is in the message. So in the resources, there is a link not just to what Slack is, but I found an article that talks specifically about how educational teams can use Slack. So definitely check that out. And then I know I've referenced that we're working on a new product, but Kit is also going to have a chat feature built in for teams to use. And what I love about that is that it's saved to the student. So everyone can find it, and it's in a place that's relevant for what the chat is about. Another consideration that you'll have to think about is scheduling. So you can use something like recurring events on Google Calendar, and then Kit also will have that functionality built in too to help easily coordinate with teammates for meetings. So whether they be student meetings or professional related, there will be some functionality in that. But the other thing you'll have to consider is that agenda piece, which I do think is helpful. When I had mentioned about meaningful participation, it will help everyone kind of keep on a set time schedule, and it sets expectations for what you'll be talking about in that time that you designate. So you can create this in Google Docs, and everyone can access that and add things to it and bookmark it. And then when you're thinking about things, you can add it in real time. I know that is something I learned from Trish, which was awesome, is that there are times that we're thinking about things and our brain is racing and we want to just ping people constantly, but that can get really overwhelming for the recipient. So if you have something like this where it's information that you don't want to forget, but you want to save it till the next meeting, then add it to the agenda. And then you know that you're not, over accessing a teammate, but that you're also not overlooking that if it's important information. In something like a Google Doc too, you can use it for task follow-up. So you can highlight and tag people in it, and then they get a notification at their email. And then there also are some options for an outline, which is super nice. I think, actually, I should have saved that. Sorry, let me go back. This kind of shows what the team agenda can look like in Google. So there is an example of this team agenda in your resources if it's something you want to look at, but you could do things like, celebrations and, where were your wins this week with your students and any student updates that are important, or what are some quick blurbs. Awareness is more of just like, what do you want your teammates to know about, but there's not really action needed, versus support is what are some things that you really need to dig into, if you're running into any barriers or need help figuring something out, you put that there. And then cascading communication, who else needs to know what you discuss? Is there a gen ed teacher, your principal, your special education director, whatever it is, just tracking that information. It's super easy to do live in the moment. And then it's searchable, which is always nice. So if you do like Control F, I think it is on a non-Mac, but on a Mac, it's the Command F, then you can search for keywords and reference back, which is super nice. I would even take it one step further. There is, for that accountability piece, there is specific task management software. So there are 3 listed here: Asana, ClickUp, and Monday. At Toolkit, we have used both Asana and ClickUp. I know I think Trello is another one. People ride hard for, the ones that they are passionate about, but it's really, again, just mapping out who needs to do what and by when and who is responsible. And so this is something we actually create our meeting agendas in this as well, because you can highlight things and assign a task right away. So anything that takes away that duplication of efforts is awesome. Like if you do have it in Google Doc, that works, but then you would have to put it in task management. So if you can create it in a system that works for your team, that's helpful. And then just bake it into future meetings too, that accountability piece of what's outstanding. What did we say we were going to do? And if there are things that aren't checked out, let's get more information and see, you know, is there more that we have to figure out for this, or is it just something that more time is needed? But whatever you use as a team, just select something that supports that clear and consistent communication within the team. And really, communication and documentation, they are there to ensure that everyone's on the same page and that nothing falls through the cracks. Okay, hack 5, Trish.
Okay, our final hack is co-planning lessons. So it not only shares the workload, but also ensures that all aspects of a student's needs are considered. It involves a team of educators creating comprehensive lesson plans. So the more team members you can get involved, the better. But don't be dissuaded by that. You can always start small with the special education teachers, SLP, Gen Ed teacher. Start with your safe place. I love that, you know, Lisa, you brought that back. And once you start small, you can start adding on and include others. And really, the whole goal is to combine expertise and experiences and different perspectives so that your lesson is that much more powerful. So why do we want to co-plan together? Here's some benefits of working together. It considers, again, all the aspects of the student's needs, increases that creativity and problem solving, and it improves student outcomes. Plus, it can significantly increase job satisfaction by fostering a sense of teamwork. So when I think about examples that I've been able to co-plan with professionals in the past, a great lesson on social skills. I love to tap into the experience and expertise of an SLP, and we can integrate each other's goals into the instruction. Social stories really allows us to do that. And it promotes that consistency, and that improves students' behaviors. They know what to expect from person to person, and that continuity is a benefit as well. So let's talk about the how behind doing this. We want to set up and protect, again, that regular time to meet. I know you've heard us say that a couple of times, but it's so important, and document all of those plans so you're not starting from scratch each time. Again, this helps out with that consistency in our lesson planning, and students know exactly what to expect. And don't recreate the wheel. There's so many tools that we can use, which I'm going to talk about some hacks right now. So when you look at this, what's highlighted here is the collaborative lesson plan. This is available in your resources. It's actually a unit plan, so 5 days of instruction. But this section here, I just wanted to highlight, what does that look like for everybody who's involved in the co-planning, and who's providing what in each step of specially designed instruction for a special education teacher, an SLP, versus what is the general education teacher. So feel free to dig into that as a resource. It goes through, again, like I said, the unit template plan, but I wanted to highlight this one section here because it shows how it is how it embeds both the objectives for the lesson, but also taking a look at the student's IEP goals and how each step looks differently for the provider. So working together to strengthen that. And again, so students have that idea of consistency and continuity between that. Collaborative software. If you haven't checked out Magic School yet, this one you can include that. It's AI driven. It has some great tools in there that you can use, and it does help you from that perspective. You can even enter in, because it is AI, you can say from a perspective of a resource teacher. So use that. I know I like to use it for those moments where it's really hard to start with a blank piece of paper, or where should I start here? So I like to use AI generated tools for that, because it's a whole lot easier for me to edit and see what's missing versus trying to come up with something from scratch. And then, of course, Kit, This is going to have the collaborative lesson planning options. So you can upload existing lesson plans, you can tag your coworkers with it. But the benefit with Kit is it has everything already there for you with the data collection piece. So you're constantly using that and designing for real time.
Okay, I have been told too that the slides aren't showing super clearly. The full slides are in the resources, and we're going to send some updated slides to you afterwards. So definitely check those out. And I apologize, but we have all of the content available for you. But getting back to collaboration, I think at this point you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, how do I do that? You know, like who has time to do all this collaboration? And that is a super valid thought. When Trish and I were initially talking about this topic, and you know, we talked about at the end, like, yeah, these are all great ideas, but who has time for that? The expression "pick your hard" came up, and if you haven't heard that term before, it's essentially saying that we all do things that are hard, but we get to choose what that hard looks like. But it can also be one of those polarizing expressions because in different contexts, there might not be a choice. So it comes off as an expression of privilege. And I do think too, like in the chat last time, I saw somebody talking about like, you know, how do you deal with caseload caps or states that don't have caseload caps, and I have 100 students, and that can be very difficult. So you might not be able to pick your hard. But when it comes to, I think just in general, special education and collaboration, pick your hard could mean for you that it's harder to manage your caseload alone, and or it's you know, or maybe it's harder to manage your caseload alone than to find time to collaborate as a team and work together. And really only you can answer that question. I have always found benefit in my collaborative relationships, and again, they've looked very different, and they looked different every year. They look different with different people, but there were times that I felt like it really worked well and it was awesome, and other times that weren't as successful. But I still, again, I always found value in it, having that team and being able to have people to bounce information off of. Picking my hard, though, also looked super different from school year to school year, as I'm sure it does for all of you too. So if you can just think about this information and start your collaboration process with just one student or just one person, and that's amazing. That's a start. And it's something that you're like, I can't do this right away. That's okay too. It just keep this information in your toolbox and bring it out when the timing makes sense for you. Sometimes starting is the hardest part. So like anything else, having some baseline data to figure out where you're at so you can map out where you want to be is super helpful. So in the resources, there is a collaboration rubric that helps your team to determine where you're strong and maybe where you have some room for improvement. And then remember, wherever that conversation goes, clear is kind. Just use it as a starting point. It's just data. It's just data. Talk about it. See if there are a couple things you can tweak as a team to make your collaboration more effective. And then we are coming up to the end of the hour, and we want to have some time for questions. So really quickly, just to recap what we've gone over so far. You can collaborate on creating goals. So create SMART goals as a team, align your efforts, and guide the direction for that student as a team. And you can use tools like SLP Toolkit or Checklist to help support this. Secondly, you're going to want to think about dividing and conquering data collection. So assign data collection roles based on team roles for that effective data gathering. You can use tools like Kit and Google Forms to streamline data collection as a team, and then hold those collaborative data reviews. Schedule those regular data review meetings to analyze insights and adjust instruction. Again, this does not have to be something you do daily or weekly. Just bake in some time for you to go over these things together as a team. Communicate. Establish those communication protocols and use the right tools to ensure clarity and understanding. So some of those tools could be Slack, that's that chat message, Kit, ClickUp, Asana. Map out your agendas and document your follow-throughs and due dates, and then hold each other accountable. And the last hack was planning together. So setting regular co-planning sessions just to share ideas, increase creativity, and maintain consistency. I know even my lesson planning, a collaborative lesson planning at one point in 1 year was just having a box with my name on it in the copy room. So teachers could make a copy of their lessons, an extra copy that they were running for students anyways, and throw it in my box. And I found that helpful. So again, this can look really different. You do what makes sense to you and what makes sense to the people that you're working with. Collaboration, it doesn't have to be a chore and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Just again, pick that one student, pick that one colleague and give it a try and see what happens, and focus on your consistent communication, set up some processes and tools that will help set you up for success and make it a little bit easier and make sure everyone's on the same page. Because it really is about coming together as a team. And again, I will reference Fong, that I loved that example she gave about, one tree is one tree, 3 trees, you're starting to build a forest, and that you're really coming together to build that, because there's power in that collective. There is power in having people that have your back, that have your students back. You guys are in the same environment and really can be there working together to support your students and each other. So we promised you some resources. And again, I will get this to the Bright Ideas team. This is something that we worked on even up to the last minute, so we didn't want to share it right away. But if you go to this bit.ly, then, and I will come back to this too, so don't feel like you have to take a picture of this right now, or you can pick up your phone and take a picture and get it recorded. But scan this QR code or go directly to this bit.ly to get access to the resources that we've shared. The resources are broken down into some of those hack areas. So there are some resources for lesson planning and for communication and data analysis and data collection. So definitely check that out. But we definitely want to get to some questions, because we know that I think we probably could have spent an hour on each one of these hacks alone, let alone, trying to have everything crammed into a 1-hour presentation. So Trish and I love identifying barriers and chatting through them and problem solving, so we can help to remove that. So we are going to go over to some questions, and I don't see any questions in the link that was shared with me. Oh, here we go. I just had to refresh. Of course, that solves 99.9% of issues. Do we have a form for general education teachers to collect data? They often have too much going on to take it, and just make it maybe more open if we hand them something. So there is a Google form that is in that resources. So in that bit.ly, let me go back to that so you can reference that. Oops. You can reference that if you go to that. There is a form that's there, but really, I like Google Forms because they're just so easy to edit and easy to share and easy to get the results out. So you can create anything that makes sense for the kind of data that they want to collect. And I think probably some of the guidance has to go into that, how they would use it. So that could be part of your baked in time that you use for accommodations and working with the team. Do you create the rubrics to score the IEP goals, or do you have a resource for that? So we do have within SLP Toolkit lots of built-in rubrics, and also a template where you can build your own rubrics, because I think, with the skills that are more dynamic, again, more complex, that they really do need to be edited student by student. Because when I think of developing a rubric, it's where is the student now and where do you want them to go? And what are those logical steps to get them from, the starting point to the finish line? So we do have rubrics. There is one that I have included in the resources too, that is sort of a universal rubric that you can think about when you're developing. You can either use that and apply it to multiple skills, or you can take it as a baseline to really map out what the skills can look like in a rubric form. Can Gen Ed teachers be added to our goals in the IEP? Trish, I'll let you take that one. I think that would be accommodations, right?
Yeah, as far as I'm thinking specific to a goal on how you provide that specially designed instruction. I can speak about Arizona. In each state has a little bit different take on that, but in Arizona, you are able to designate who is the best person to provide that specially designed instruction. Typically, I see this from maybe the literacy coach is going to be the one who's providing the reading instruction because they're the best to do that. I really would say that you need to check in with your district and what those expectations are, but from a legal standpoint. But when you think of just that data collection and supporting it, absolutely, they should be part of that.
Okay, there were some questions too about using rubrics. And again, I know that the rubrics can be new. When they were introduced to my world, it just made me sigh and a sigh of relief, because I will admit I used to even have grad students that I would say I wouldn't write goals if I didn't know how to measure them. And the complex goals, I would write it and I would support it, is what I would say, but I had a hard time writing it because I didn't know how to measure it. So rubrics open up the world, I think, of just really addressing whatever need you want. But there was a question about, do you attach it to the IEP? And the answer is absolutely yes, because if that student, whether they move from your school to a different school or a different state, that receiving team needs to understand how you're measuring that. And I also think too, those scores, like if you think of the rubric that, or the goal that we had shown for reading comprehension, it said as measured by a rubric, in that they would score 14 out of 15. Those are arbitrary numbers. They have no meaning unless you have the rubric to reference. So definitely attach it. And there was a question too about who is rating or scoring it, the SLP or the classroom teacher. And I think that depends on the skill and the what you're trying to measure, but it's consistency. So it might be, I've used rubrics where I am only using my data as the SLP. I've completed rubrics where I'm using data from other providers as well. So whatever you're doing, document it in the IEP. So it's really clear, because then it's clear for you, again, receiving team. And then I always think too, parents, a lot of times we throw out information and it's just, they don't know, like, what is main idea and details. And so when you get into those, you can really target how that skill is progressing. And then I love them too, even for our students that have really complex communication needs, and their gains are slower, but they're huge gains. But you don't see it if you're just tracking a percentage. Like maybe they go from 15 to 16%, but that 1% is huge for that student. So rubrics just allow you to really tell more of the story of that student and show that progress in a way that's not just a score.
And you're talking about rubrics, and I'm seeing in the chat too, people love rubrics. I do too. And it's also a tool you can use to promote self-agency with the student as well. So the rubrics can be student facing, and it allows them to see, where am I at, and what's the next step that will help me to get to proficiency. So you can use it that way too. Don't recreate the wheel. I just Googled it because I couldn't remember the rubric I used to use all the time, and it's Rubistar. So there's tons of things out there to help you with those rubric generation.
We had a question too about, what do you suggest when you have team members that are resistant to the idea of shared collaborative data collection? And again, I feel like this aligns with Fong, the question that she had about, what do you do when you have a SPED director that just doesn't even see you as a person, they see you as a position. And so I would start with your people that aren't resistant, because they talk. And it becomes, when it's seen that this is a resource and helpful and great for students and great for the professionals, that tends to catch on. What advice would you have for that, Trish?
Yeah, I think it's always coming up with, what is the barrier? Why is there hesitancy? And I think about just change in general. And sometimes we assume it's somebody who doesn't want to do it, but it's maybe the situation that hasn't, or the environment that hasn't made that a priority or accessible for them. So I go in with positive intent, and I would just be, direct and ask. And then it's from that point on, it's about removing barriers of, maybe it's a time issue. Maybe it's, they don't feel like they have the resources in order to be able to contribute. So lead with positive intent and try to get to the bottom of it. And then you'll have a better idea from that root cause of what solution can we identify from there.
There's a great question here too. We reference Google Forms a lot and asked if they're secure and confidential. So there are school teams that buy an educational license for Google. So check with your district on security, but that should cover some of that privacy and confidentiality piece. And then again, you can add password protection to things as well to give it that extra layer if that's what you would like to do. Okay, I think we have gone through a lot of the questions. We want to get to some fun stuff too and do a giveaway. So really quickly, if you'd like to keep in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. We have our social handles. SLP Toolkit is one of them. And then our new product is Kit for Teams. So please definitely head over to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever your preferences, and give us a follow and come along with us. We like to share blog posts and resources and fun stuff and whatever else. There were questions specifically too about Kit. I saw one question about, is Kit separate from Toolkit? And it is. So it is a separate subscription. It will be, if you have any questions, if you're a current Toolkit user and have questions, send us an email, hello@slptoolkit.com, and we can talk about what that might look like as we, to see which product might be a better fit for you. But we want to do a giveaway. So we are going to give one live attendee a full year's access to SLP Toolkit. And then one winner is going to have a year's access to Kit for themselves and their special education team. So that will be up to 5 people on your team. So our winners are, for SLP Toolkit, the winner is Michelle Rogowski, Rogowski. We'll send you an email with more information on collecting that. And then our Kit winner for you and your team is Leah Portener, Portener. And again, Kit is not quite ready for us to share with you yet, but I will send you an email and I will be in touch as well as soon as we have the ability to give it to you and your team. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And we love to run an offer for everyone when we do Summit, because we are a sponsor of Summit and we host it. So if you are interested in checking out SLP Toolkit, you can try it for free and create a trial. And if it's something that you feel like would be a good fit for you and your practice for this upcoming year, we're doing 20% off of a year subscription. So you just have to enter that code Summit20. And that will be good through the end of Summit. So definitely take advantage of that. That's for anybody that's either new to SLP Toolkit, or if you're a current monthly member and you want to transfer over to a yearly plan, now is a great time to do that with that offer. And then Kit, we've mentioned a few times, it's coming soon, and we are going to do a flash offer for our Summit participants. So just keep an eye out in your inbox. We are going to email you when Kit is officially released. And we'll dig into, Trish and I have talked about doing a video that's just specific to the collaboration piece too, and how Kit can support that. So keep an eye out, and we would love you, to check out both. And we just really appreciate your time today. Make sure that you check out before you leave. If you have any questions, check out the ASHA opt-in requirements, if that applies to you, if you are wanting participation sent to the registry. But other than that, if you have questions at all about the course and the conference, you can email hello@bethebrightest.com. And we really appreciate you spending an hour with us this afternoon. We hope you have the best school year ever coming up in 2024-25. All right. Bye, everyone.